Over the past 2 decades, I've played a wide range of open world games. And one thing has become very clear. Not all open worlds are created equally. Some are packed to the brim with activities, constantly pulling you in dozens of directions at once. Some are almost empty, offering you bugger all to see and do. Then, there are those that captivate purely through visual beauty, crafting worlds that are just a joy to exist in. And then, there's this. Crimson Desert feels as if someone's locked a team of developers in a room with every game mechanic ever invented, from inventory management to goat theft, and shouted, "Right! We're not leaving until all of this is in one game." The result is a ludicrously overstuffed behemoth, an overwhelming ocean to fiddle with, break, ignore, and then accidentally spend hundreds of hours doing that instead of the main storyline. There is MMO DNA pumping through Crimson Desert's veins. It's a battalion of baffling systems, and there's enough build variety to make your brain spin like a corrupted save file, and questing that often feels like a whiplash of high-intense fighting or a mundane chore. But then, because of course it's also riddled with design decisions that are so ancient that they feel like they were discovered in a tomb next to the dial-up internet system, after about 90 hours, I've been bouncing between awe and fury, like a character stuck in a physics glitch, all while feeling like I've barely completed the prologue. It's enormous! Absurdly enormous! And trying to organise my thoughts about this game is like trying to herd cats in Skyrim during a dragon attack. So, let's start off with the easy bit. Cliff, the main protagonist. He's gruff, Scottish, in which, in video game language, it means that he communicates primarily through grunting and violence. He's part of the Greymanes, and after being ambushed by the Black Bears, he ends up with his throat slit and his mates scattered across the continent like loot spilling out of a defeated boss. Crimson Desert doesn't ease you in. It drop kicks you into the action, like you've skipped the tutorial, and then, for good measure, puts you straight off a cliff. From there, it's all about rebuilding, rounding up your scattered crew, forging alliances, and essentially putting your guild back together after the worst raid night in history. It's a solid premise. Not exactly revolutionary, more seen it before, but with nicer lighting. The story, however, good grief! Experiencing it feels like someone's randomly unplugging your console during the cutscenes. Characters don't so much converse as vaguely emote in each other's general direction. The tone is it's all over the place. You start off in this bizarre floating cube dimension that looks like a graphics benchmark test, and then the game spends the next 30 hours pretending it never happened. It's disjointed, confusing, and about as cohesive as a heavily modded RPG held together by sheer optimism. There's no clear timeline, no clear motivations, and half the time, I wasn't even sure why I was doing anything. It's less of a story and more a glorified waypoint delivery system. And yet, plot twist, the side quests, mostly, are brilliant. While the main story is off having an identity crisis, the side content is where the charm lives. The Greymanes themselves are oddly delightful. Jan swears like he's permanently stuck in an online lobby. Naira barks orders like a Reddit moderator on caffeine, and Andrew is so nervous he feels like he might apologise mid-battle. These moments are a welcome break. Gambling with Jan, dyeing clothes with Naira, crafting bows for the children, it's all wonderfully mundane in a game that otherwise behaves like it's been struck by lightning. Of course, these are just elaborate excuses to drag you into Crimson Desert's utterly ridiculous number of systems, and I do mean ridiculous. You can invest in stocks, steal goats, chop trees, mine ore, arm wrestle, tame horses, build camps, run trading caravans, decorate houses, rugby tackle birds out of mid-air for absolutely no reason whatsoever, and even befriend dogs by effectively bribing them with snacks, and it's just naming a few. At this point, I'm fairly certain that if you left the game running long enough, it would start answering your emails. It's like the game has been designed by someone who's never heard the word enough. Every step forward is another sugary distraction, another mechanic to poke at, like a curious toddler with a controller. Some of it's brilliant. Gambling, for instance, is dangerously addictive and deeply satisfying. The ability to just pick up any small animal? Completely pointless, and therefore, magnificent. But then, there's horse taming. Oh dear. This isn't horse taming. This is fighting with a shopping trolley possessed by a demon. The controls wobble, the camera flails about, and the whole thing just feels like trying to input a cheat code while someone's shaking your arms. And naturally, the tutorial arrives about 10 hours too late, like a sat-nav that tells you where to turn right after you've driven into a lake. Even stranger are the things you can't do, like storing items. In a game about collecting resources, it has been given an inventory system designed by someone who has never played a video game before. An inventory cap that's so small? Whose idea was that? And why do they still have a job? And then there's fast travel, or as I like to call it, moderately quicker inconvenience points that are scattered across the map like breadcrumbs left by someone who hates you. And then there are the puzzles that range from clever to utterly baffling. Sometimes you feel like a genius for solving them. Other times you just sit there wondering if the developers are actively mocking you. Thankfully, exploring the world makes up for it. Piewell is absolutely gorgeous. Lush forests, sprawling deserts, towering mountain ranges. It's like someone cranked the graphics settings to ridiculous and then kept going. Even when it's empty, it feels alive. Trees sway, birds scatter, rivers babble away as if they've got secrets to share, and some cases, they do. It's the kind of world where you set out with a purpose and immediately forget it because you've spotted something shiny on a cliff. Combat, meanwhile, are where things really come alive. It's fast, fluid, and gloriously over the top, like button mashing in a fighting game that somehow pulls off the perfect combo. You've got light attacks, heavy attacks, skills, magic. Every button press feels like it might trigger something spectacular. Even unarmed combat is brilliant. Charging in, clotheslining someone never gets old. And there's a certain joy in just grabbing enemies and flinging them about like ragdolls. But then, there's the bosses. Suddenly, the game decides it wants to be brutally difficult, and not always in a fair way. Attacks come thick and fast, mistakes are punished harshly. Sometimes it feels less like a challenge and more like the game is having a go at you personally. Thankfully, Pearl Abyss fixed this in an update, but there are still some bosses out there that still end with me rage quitting. Karoosh, in particular, is an absolute menace. The idea is fantastic, the reality, it's like being repeatedly flattened with a freight train while the controls argue amongst themselves. Can't dodge in time? Dead. Knocked down? Dead. Rolled the wrong way? Dead again. It's punishing in a way that feels more irritating than rewarding. You end up playing cautiously, relying on panic attacks and panic dodging like Prince Andrew when he's asked about his relationship with a certain someone. And yet, despite all the chaos, the performance is rock solid. Even in huge battles and sprawling environments, it runs remarkably well. Yes, the characters occasionally look like slightly haunted mannequins, and textures pop in as if they've just remembered that they exist. But frankly, I'll take that over a stuttering mess any day. In the end, Crimson Desert is a game that tries to do absolutely everything, and in many ways, it succeeds. It's chaotic, messy, occasionally infuriating, but also strangely charming. It's not the smoothest of games or the easiest to get your head around, but it's one of the most fascinating. If other open worlds were a finely tuned racing simulator, this one is like a festival mode, where someone strapped rockets to a shopping trolley and told you to get on with it. Is it the best game ever made? No. Is it impressive? Undeniably. And trying to fully understand it feels like analysing every single leaf on a massive tree. Pointless, overwhelming, and yet oddly compelling. And somehow, I just can't seem to put the controller down. In the end, I've decided to give Crimson Desert a very solid 8.5 out of 10. Okay, Before we dive headfirst into the spoiler section, like a man who's just seen our big red button labelled "Do Not Press," I should point out that ever since I recorded the first part of this review, quite a lot has changed. You see, many of these issues I moaned about earlier have actually been improved through updates. Bosses are easier, controls are smoother, puzzles are clearer, the storage is better. Not perfect, but at least it's no longer a crime against humanity. And there's now an easy mode for those who don't fancy being emotionally destroyed after work. My score, however, stays at 8.5. Because while it's a fantastic game, some core issues still linger. Like the utterly baffling decision to make a jump button the same as the interaction button. I mean, honestly, who thought that was a good idea? It's like putting the brake pedal and the horn on the same switch. But despite that, I haven't been this absorbed in an open world game since Elden Ring. It's that good. So, with that out of the way, welcome to the spoiler section. This is where we talk about the story, the big moments, the places and the people, and all the bits that will absolutely ruin this experience if you haven't already played it. So, now if you don't want spoilers, now is your cue to leave. So, go on, shoo! But before you do go though, like, comment, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, sacrifice a goat to the algorithm, and give us a wee follow on Twitch. And if you fancy supporting this channel, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link down in the description. Any donation is greatly appreciated. Right, now that that's done, on with the review. I am currently about 250 hours into this game, and I've only just rolled the end credits. It took me about 90 hours just to leave the opening region alone. Now, in my defence, I was distracted. Constantly. Because the open world in this game is absurdly good. And I just keep wandering off like a Labrador lost in a park. But let's talk about the main story. It's fine. Not bad. Not amazing. It's just sort of there. Like a slightly underwhelming sandwich. It feels like the developers have had several great ideas, but glued them together using wishful thinking and duct tape. The pacing is odd, the chapters don't quite flow, and the opening hours, well, Jesus Christ, they are dreadful. You start off by getting killed, which, this kind of humbling to be fair, is standard in games like Dark Souls and Elden Ring and all those kind of From Software games, but then it just gets weird. You ride to a city, chatting away to a random man, arm wrestle a guard because, obviously, give a beggar a coin, unblock a chimney, rescue a cat, and save a random girl from a sewer for some reason. And somehow, all that earns you a key to a random room in a castle that has an abyss portal. You then enter this Axiom archive, where the game throws vague tutorials at you like a teacher who's just given up halfway through the lesson. The first Abyss puzzle is less of a challenge and more of, why am I like this? But then, mercifully, it gets better. And fast. Because suddenly, you're skydiving into the world of Pywell, and boom! There it is! A proper wow moment. The kind where you just sit back and grin like an idiot. The opening region, Hernand, is enormous and beautiful. White cliffs, forests, and a stunning city. It's all there, and it's packed with things to do. No wonder I spent 90 hours there. The lack of guidance actually works very much in its favour. You just wander about, find things, get distracted, completely lose track of what you're doing. 1 minute you're helping someone with a minor chore, next minute you're storming into a quarry full of bandits where you saw a poster and thought, why not? And that is exactly what I did. And it went well. Until I got to the boss, which was a thing called Marnie's Excavatron. To say I got obliterated would be like saying that a volcano is mildly temperately warm. I was hopelessly underleveled, so I did what any sensible person would do, and I ran away. Spent hours grinding, upgrading gear, hoarding food, and generally preparing like I was about to invade a small country. Eventually, I came back. And beat it! The sense of achievement was immense. And then, much like the Tree Sentinel in Elden Ring, I realised that this thing isn't even close to the hardest boss in the game. Wonderful. After that little 20 or so hour delay, I return to the main story. Chapters 1 to 3 are fairly standard, helping Lord Circus, finding Greymian survivors, and that sort of thing. There's a decent bit where you get to sneak into what is essentially a very unpleasant mental asylum, and then Chapter 4 rolls in, and finally things get a little more interesting. You visit the Scholarstone Institute, mess about with a bit of research and a few lessons, and then, shockingly, it goes terribly wrong. And then enter Caliburn, one of the main villains, who actually brings some much needed intrigue. Chapter 6 is another standout, the Siege of Calphaed. Proper chaos. A big battle, lots of tension, and there we encounter Muradin and the Black Bears, who were the men responsible for killing Cliff at the beginning of the game. They are not exactly rays of sunshine. Then we hit Chapter 8. This is the point where the game basically says, right, you've had enough of Hernand, away you go. You travel to Peilun, a northern kingdom filled with redwood forests, snowy mountains, and a forest so dense it might as well be made of darkness. The city itself felt like someone asked, what of Vikings? But also Japan. And then they just went with it. You can even spend your camp resources to rebuild the place and turn it into one of Pywell's powerhouses, which is incredibly satisfying. Oh, and you also get to play as a second protagonist here, Unka, the orc, who fights like a runaway freight train, complete with a different playstyle, and it's just a brilliant addition. Chapter 9 expands things again with the Kingdom of Demonis. This is a personal favourite region of mine, with vast farmland, dramatic coastlines, and a city that practically screams, we're in charge. It's huge, it's grand, it's brilliant. Here, you get tangled in a political conspiracy. Cliff gets captured, classic, and you get to switch to Damian, a third playable character who uses rapiers and pistols. Fast, elegant, deadly, great fun. Then comes Delicia. And honestly, this place is mad. It's a steampunk wonderland. Robots, airships, trains, mech suits, yes, mech suits, in what is supposedly a medieval fantasy game. There's a rogue AI running the place, because why not? And it's given Caliburn a giant flying death trap of a fortress. Naturally, to stop it, you have to team up with the rightful ruler of Delicia and take down the AI, and then you get to ride a dragon. A dragon. And it's brilliant! Except there's a time limit. About 10 minutes of fun, followed by an hour cooldown. Which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, like I said before, who thinks of this? This is the end game! I want to rain fire from the skies, not sit around waiting like I've missed the bus. Yes, there's an item to remove the cooldown, but it's a random drop. It's a brilliant idea, but terrible execution. Finally, the Crimson Desert itself, which, oddly, only appears for an hour at the end. Bit strange considering it's the name of the game. Still, it's gorgeous Arabian-style cities, massive dunes, towering canyons, one of the best desert regions I've seen in a video game, and usually I find desert regions in games about as exciting as beige paint. The final chapter, though, is pure spectacle. You siege Fort Musket, fly the dragon in, destroy everything in sight, charge in with an army. It's epic! Then, Caliburn retreats to the Abyss. And here's a tip. Before you get to this stage, make sure you sort of whittle away at the Abyss puzzles throughout the game, because if you don't, you'll have to do all 40 of them before you get to the final boss. And trust me, that's not as fun as you think it is. The Abyss itself is a mixed bag. Some puzzles are fantastic, clever, satisfying, rewarding. Others are infuriating, mostly because the controls occasionally feel like they're arguing with you. But visually, it's incredible. You're on these floating islands high above the world, with views that genuinely make you just stop and stare. You can see everything. and it constantly reminds you of just how vast and impressive this game really is. And when you finally get to Caliburn, the game just stops messing about and decides to put on a show. And what a show it is. First up, you've got the Corrupted Caliburn phase. This is your standard opening act. Big, dramatic, slightly angry, but ultimately manageable. It's the gaming equivalent of a warm-up band. You beat him, you nod, you think, right, that wasn't too bad. Then that's because, of course, he transforms. Now, you're fighting Muradin, corrupted avatar of Umbra. And suddenly, things get a little bit more spicy. This is where the game leans forward, cracks its knuckles, and says, alright, let's see what you've actually learned. It's tougher, faster, and significantly less interested in your well-being. But then, the game pulls the rug right from beneath your feet, because the real final boss is revealed. Umbra, or as I like to call it, God. And this fight is not just a boss fight, it's a full-on event. The arena collapses, because apparently solid ground is just overrated, and now you're fighting on the back of the dragon, flying through the sky, everything falling apart around you, trading blows with what is essentially a deity. It is utterly ridiculous, and completely brilliant. Once you somehow survive this apocalyptic scrap and put God back in his box, the game does something rather lovely. It gives you a victory lap of Pywell. You travel right back through the world, revisiting cities, meeting characters that you encountered along the ways, the ones you've helped and the ones you've annoyed. It's a chance to breathe, reflect, and remember just how much ground that you've covered. And then you go to Varnia, a small region north of the Crimson Desert, an oasis in the middle of the arsehole of nowhere. It's calm, peaceful, beautiful, towering structures, quiet atmosphere. It feels like the world has finally decided to stop trying to kill you for 5 minutes. And here, you meet the random gentleman that you rode to Hernand with at the very beginning of the game, which is it's just perfect. After 250 hours of being battered, bruised, and occasionally humiliated, it's a quiet, fitting end. No explosions, no chaos, just a moment of calm. So, where does that leave us? Crimson Desert is, without question, one of the most impressive and immersive games I've played. The world is extraordinary. The combat is outstanding. It constantly pulls you in, distracts you, and refuses to let you go. But the story, however, is a bit of a mess. Not a bad mess. There's genuinely a lot of strong moments in it, but it's inconsistent, the opening is weak, the pacing is all over, and the chapters just don't always connect well as they should. It's like a brilliant TV series with a few episodes that were written by someone who'd just never seen it before. When everything comes together, it's spectacular, and more often than not. And that's what you will remember from it. So, that concludes our Crimson Desert review. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and go and give us a follow on Twitch. All the links are down below in the description. And we will see you for our next review.